If you imagine your public relations as a wheel, and it's always turning, and there's all these different spokes on the wheel, and they each represent different kinds of stories.
You're listening to Thrive by Design, business, marketing, and lifestyle strategies for your jewelry brand to flourish and thrive. Let's get started.
Welcome to episode number 52 of the Thrive by Design podcast. It's Tracy Matthews here, and I have a treat for you today. I have a special guest, and we're going to talk all about building sales and PR confidence. Now, before I introduce my guest, I just wanted to start by talking a little bit more about what we've been hearing from you. And I know when I was a designer starting out in business, putting myself out there to pitch my own sales or to pitch my own PR was a little bit scary. I'm not going to lie. I was really close to my product, and even though I'd come from a sales background, selling my own things was very different than selling other things that I enjoyed and liked. So, I had a lot of fear, and sometimes I didn't feel very confident because maybe I wasn't sure that my product was the right product, or jewelry was the right jewelry for the stores that I was pitching to, or that, I kind of had, I'm not going to lie, some feelings of like, am I really good enough to be doing this? Like I kind of felt like an imposter, and it created a lot of fear inside me about being able to pitch myself to editors and do my own PR. Now, I quickly learned through the process of like building a business and growing that, that fear that you feel is not really useful unless you use it as a tool to motivate you. And I'm really excited because my guest on the show today is going to talk about some tools that you can use to build more sales and PR confidence. So without further ado, I wanted to announce who the guest is. Yay, it's Sabina Hitchen of Sabina Knows. And I've known Sabina for a while virtually through social media, which has been really fun. I know that social media can be such a game changer these days because you get to connect with people that you might not otherwise meet. And, I don't know. I thought that maybe Sabina and I connected on Facebook maybe, let's see, like 4 or 5 years ago. But I think it was actually more like 7 or 8 years ago because I feel like I still was in my office on Canal Street when I started using Facebook, and she was one of the first people that I connected to. And I totally remember her sharing some of the designers that she was working with. And one of those designers, I would see them sort of bounce back and forth all the time on Facebook, was this girl, Rachel Dooley, who had quit her job to launch her jewelry brand. And it was so fun to watch her because sort of as I was transitioning out of trade shows, she started launching into trade shows with her brand Gemma Redux. And I interviewed her a couple of years ago for our Design to Thrive series, interview series that we did. Total sidebar. But anyway, I remember sort of finding out about this designer, Rachel Dooley of Gemma Redux, through Sabina, which is cool. So you never know how exposure is going to happen and how to build confidence and really get yourself out there. So I'm really excited to have Sabina Hitchen on today. She has a wealth of knowledge about how to build confidence, and she's going to share some of her daily practices that she recommends that you can use to help build your confidence and sort of kick fear in the bootay so that you can really build more confidence in your sales and PR efforts. So without further ado, I want to jump right into the interview. Sabina, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to all of you.
Yeah, well, I'm excited because we've kind of been connected on social media. Social media is so weird. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've made all these wonderful connections through social media, and I've been friends with people like you for many, many years on social media. And, you just never know how your paths are going to cross. And then eventually you start, working together. So I don't know when we became friends on Facebook, but I feel like it must have been 4 or 5 years ago.
I think it was even longer. It was many moons. I feel like I was a baby entrepreneur because then I feel like you follow everyone's story. And so you feel like you've been next to them physically their whole journey. And then when we get to connect like this, it's so much more powerful. Yeah, you know what? It might have even been when I still had my office for Tracy Matthews Designs on Canal Street, which is, I think it was. Because I feel weren't you doing PR for Gemma Redux? I was. Well, she was we were helping her out. Yeah, she was a member of a community I ran. And that was a long time ago because I had an office in Chelsea back then, which I don't anymore either. So it was a really long time ago. Yeah. A really exciting time when we were all getting our starts. It was really exciting.
Yeah, super fun. Okay, so I'm going to do a formal introduction of you. So for the people who are just finding out about you, know a little bit more about your background. And then I want to dive into some of these sales and PR confidence techniques that you have for us. So let's get started. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Sabina Hitchen is the founder of SabinaKnows.com, which is packed with fluff-free content and classes created to help business owners get publicity effectively, efficiently, and confidently. A former Midwestern high school teacher and a curriculum designer, she turned a desire for a Big Apple chapter in her life into a career in public relations in New York City that saw her start an agency which specialized in small business owners and experts, including jewelry brands of all sizes and styles. Since 2008, she's channeled her teaching skills into educating and empowering entrepreneurs online, providing them with tools, training, courses, and free PR classes and education that they need to share their businesses with the press and the world. Sabina's clients and students are regulars in the press, appearing everywhere from the O-List to the Today Show, People's Style Watch, to InStyle Magazine, Refinery 29, to Vogue, Inc., to Entrepreneur Magazine. Find Sabina and her PR support at SabinaKnows.com and at Sabina Knows across social media. Sabina, I'm so excited to have you here. And before, we were doing like a little chat before the call, and I know you as a different Sabina Potassin, and you got married. And I was always so confused about how to say your last name, so you cleared it up for me. Thank you so much. But now it's so much easier because now you go by Sabina Hitchen, easy name to say.
Super simple. Super simple. Or just Sabina, they'll be like, oh yeah,
we know Sabina. All right, so I could share my experience about what I know about you, but I would love to hear in your own words a little bit more about your story and your journey.
Sure. I love to tell it. I love it also because I feel like most entrepreneurs listening have been in a space when they're like, this isn't what I studied in school, or am I experienced enough to do what I'm doing? And I like to share my journey because there's twists and turns, but you always end up where you're supposed to be.
Exactly.
So I'm from the Midwest, like you say. I live on the East Coast now, but I was raised in Michigan and went to school in Michigan. I studied history and political science, thinking I would be a lawyer because that sounded really good for my parents. So I said that. And then after I left college, I was like, there's no way I want to be a lawyer. What can I do? So basically, accidentally, I became a teacher. I read a book about equity in education. I thought I should give back a year and teach. I said, send me where you need teachers. So they sent me to Chicago. And I started teaching there with very little experience, but I immediately realized that I really loved teaching. It was not just empowering other people, but it was empowering for myself. I had a blast, and I thought, this is what I'm meant to do. So I went from that school. I went on to work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I designed education curriculum there. I taught in their charter schools. Again, I'm like loving teaching, getting really good at it. But I started to realize that I wasn't meant to spend all day with high schoolers. That was not my jam. So I did what a lot of people do when they're like, what do I do next? And I decided to move to New York. Like you said, I literally emailed
That's
my
always
parents.
the solution, right? Moving to New York.
It was like New York or LA, but I was sort of closest to New York, and that seemed the least scary. And I had some friends here, and I literally emailed my parents on the plane, like, oh, I'm moving to New York, because I was so scared about their reaction. They were okay with it eventually. But I moved to New York, wasn't sure what to do. And by, again, like another great stroke of luck, a friend said, you're pretty high energy. You like to write. You love people. I've heard there's an opening, a friend of a friend, in the publicity department at Escada, which was a big deal. Of course, at the time, I was like fresh off the teaching boat in Michigan, and I had to Google, what is publicity and public relations? What is Escada? And all these things. And it was so sad. All my friends looked at me like, oh my gosh, just wear a little bit more black to the interview than all the pink you're wearing. And long story short, it worked out. Got a job there. And that was sort of my second professional realization. I said, I love public relations. I get it. I got it fast and furious, and I really, really loved it. Went on to work at an agency so I could learn how to deal with multiple clients. And then about a year and a half after I landed in New York, I started my own PR agency, which I was running for over a decade in New York City, and it was amazing. So both my careers my teaching career led to my PR career, and that led to where I am now.
That's so cool.
Teaching entrepreneurs. It's like I always say to people, both my careers had a baby, like they fell in love, they had a baby, and I realized I could both teach and focus on publicity at the same time. And so that's what I do now.
That's so fun. So when you have your PR company, what kind of clients were you working with mostly?
You know, it was when I was at a bigger agency learning how to have multiple clients, they always gave me sort of the clients that nobody necessarily wanted, which were the small, because they were celebrity and cool brands. So they gave me the entrepreneurs and the small biz experts that were just starting out. They were much more difficult to get press for. But I fell in love with those people. I thought this is really where the excitement is. And I'd never been around so many passionate female entrepreneurs. It was amazing. So when I did my agency, we specialized in small biz owners and entrepreneurs with a heavy focus on jewelry designers, accessories, because we sort of started that way. And when you get a reputation with working people, with people, that's what you do. And we also focused a lot on experts. And for people listening who might say, well, I'm a jewelry designer, I'm not an expert. The more you get to know me, the more you'll realize that it's so important as a designer and as a brand that you show more than one side of you and your business. So just as you want to show your products, you want to share yourself as an expert and an entrepreneur. So we focused on both sides of the brands that we worked with.
Well, I feel another podcast coming on pretty soon.
Oh, for sure. I'm a huge believer in that, because you can't just be shoving your products out there like a factory all day. People want to know the face. And I know we'll talk about that later, but when we worked with these accessories, designers, and small biz owners of all kinds, they became known in the press, not just for their products, but also for who they were and their brand and their expertise.
I love that. Oh my gosh. We're doing another one, girl.
100%.
All right, cool. So, this podcast, like the theme of the podcast is really about building confidence. And I feel like building confidence affects sales and PRs. And so even though you have more of a PR background rather than a sales background, I feel like marketing and sales are so closely connected. So I wanted to ask you that you've seen it. There's so much talent out there, right? You could throw a rock and hit a talented jewelry designer who has a beautiful collection of jewelry. What do you think sets equally talented designers apart, first and foremost? And then more specifically, what is it that gets them noticed by potential buyers or exposure in the media?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I think it's important that people hear that. There are a lot of amazing designers out there, and the rise of social media and this openness in the press and influencers, all that jazz, has given a lot more stage room. There's a lot more people out there right now than there were maybe 10 years ago who are fighting for the same amount of real estate in the press. So you need to acknowledge there are great people out there, equally talented as you are. So you have to push and to distinguish yourself. One big way I think you need to do that, even if you're both equally talented, is you have to be sure that across everything you do, I'm talking your website, especially that homepage, your collections, your social media feed, the way you interact with people online and in person, that you have a very clear voice and a clear brand and a clear feeling that is associated with your brand. It's not just anything as big as stock imagery all over your place to just something that feels, you land on some people's websites and you know what that brand stands for, you get it. And then you land on some and it feels a little bit generic. And even if you have beautiful pieces, it has to have a clear voice, brand, and feeling and be very distinct. So that's a really important thing, because otherwise you're going to fall into the vast ocean of other accessories brands. Another thing that I think is huge is this mantra my mom always had when I was growing up, which is, and I'm sure a lot of you have said it too, how you do anything is how you do everything. So when you are a designer, no matter how amazing your pieces are or how talented you are, you need to bring it because people are looking at you and judging you with everything you do. So from your images to your samples, to your packaging, to your website, because if the buyers or the press are left unimpressed, why would they take the next step in investing in your brand or sharing it with other people? So you have to look put together, because if there's two equally talented designers, but one is sort of a mess in terms of what they're delivering and their packaging and everything, and one is much more tied up with a nice bow, we know who's going to win the attention of the press. A couple other things I have when you're sort of racing with people to get great press or great sales opportunities, you want to make sure that throughout the time you're working in your business that you're communicating with the right audience the right way. So again, you can have two really talented designers, but you have to be sharing the pieces with the magazine or the TV show or the buyer that is the right fit for your products, and their audience is the right fit. And sometimes we really want something to work for Vogue magazine, but it's a better fit for working mother. So you just need to accept that, because otherwise you're wasting your time and you're going to miss out on opportunities that could really grow your brand. Sort of like dating. If you're focused on the wrong person all the time, you're missing all these amazing sales reps and editors and other people who could be great for your brand. So again, I think it all to me ladders back to, you can be the most amazing jewelry designer in the world, but if you don't know how to get your brand out there in front of the press, connect with influencers, behave like a professional, present your brand clearly and distinctively, you're just not going to make it, or it's going to be a lot harder. And so again, you really need to sometimes take the emotion out of your design and look at your business as a business.
Wow, Sabina, I loved everything that you just said there. And especially one thing that really hit home for me is what you said about really trying to be focused on, the right publications or the right media outlets. Because if you're focusing on Vogue and it's not like really the right fit for your brand, you end up wasting a lot of time and missing some really good opportunities. And it really made me think about when I was a designer, an emerging brand, and I just, was selling into a ton of stores. And I remember one of the stores that I really wanted to get into was Barney's. And I remember spending so much time and energy trying to get into Barney's. And even one of the buyers stopped by my booth one time at the show. And, she gave me her card and I followed up and she just wasn't responding. And I realized, I spent, years of my time like focusing on trying to get into Barney's. And, after I had a little space and like was able to look back, I realized, what I was designing at that time really wasn't a good fit for that store. And even if they were to have bought it, probably wouldn't have sold because it wasn't the right audience.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
mean?
mean?
And that's so key what you're saying. Like when we talk publicity or sales, you need to not take it as personally, because the audience in these situations is king or queen, as I'd like to say. So that's the people that the editors are thinking for, and the bloggers and the influencers and the sales and the buyers. All these people are thinking of their audience. So their audience and their outlet and their store isn't going to change the customer just for your business or change the way they market things. So you need to know when it's time. I mean, I'm all about persistence, but you also need to have a heart to heart with yourself, because again, you are competing with other designers. So go to where you belong and fight like heck to get in there, but really be honest with yourself about where you belong. I mean, just do some research, pretty quickly, is this the kind of place that my jewelry is appearing, or is it completely somewhere different?
Exactly. Totally. I'm like right on board with you. It will save so much time, and you'll start to know when you start getting publicity, like what works and what doesn't work, because of the type of traffic and exposure that you get from it, in my opinion, personally.
Exactly. Because if you're not meant for Vogue, and then, oh my gosh, you work for months to get a Vogue.com, but their audience isn't into you, then that was a lot of wasted time. Like PR is only great for the logos for so long, because what you really need as a business owner is sales and leveraging those opportunities.
Exactly. So I wanted to shift the focus slightly here, because I know that, we hear this a lot, that storytelling and sharing your story is one of the most important things about really building a jewelry brand. And you briefly kind of mentioned that a little bit, that angle earlier about becoming an expert for your brand. But I feel like, storytelling more than anything, the story behind a brand is so important these days. And the messaging around that is almost more important than even your jewelry. So it's not just enough anymore, as we were talking about earlier, just to have awesome jewelry to get exposure. So from your perspective, why do you think there's been this shift towards storytelling, and why do you think that sharing your message is so important to getting more PR exposure? And also, the same runs true for sales.
I think you're 100% right. Storytelling is everywhere. Everyone in marketing is talking about it. But what I think happened was, for starters, social media changed everything in this country. And in a big way, it's allowed for more transparency in business than ever before. So whereas people sort of used to hide in their businesses, and you just saw their products and you love them, now with social media, we want to see who's a part of a business, and people love it. And you just look at the numbers on social media that are growing exponentially, and you look at how businesses are sharing themselves on Periscope and Instagram, and it's true. And the other thing that I think happened, which all of your listeners listeners should really be taking advantage of is there has been this rise of the entrepreneur and the rise of the girl boss or the guy boss as a celebrity and an aspirational figure. Like, I don't know about you, but when people hear I'm an entrepreneur, it's like I tell them, I'm an Olympian sometimes. Like, that's so cool. I wish I could do that. Even though we all know how hard it is on the back end, there's something about being an entrepreneur these days. So you got the transparency, the rise of the entrepreneur that people are curious about and excited about, and they want to root for you. So there is a massive need for customers and consumers and the press to know the person behind the business. Like, I want to know who the founder of the company is. I want to know why they do it and what they do and what their belief is about their accessories line, the story behind the story. As a customer, I want to feel connected to the places where I'm spending my money and my time. And so I do that by really knowing what their personal story is, knowing what they look like. Can I tell you, Tracy, I have been to people's About Us pages and they don't have a photo.
I know. It's crazy.
And I'm like, are you a real person or are you a robot? And you can't do that. I mean, I want to follow their social media posts. I want to read their blog, and I want those posts and that blog to not always be just product. Even if it's, Tracy's pics of her favorite products, I want to know and feel connected, because when I connect, I stay in that community and I engage and I tell my friends about it and I buy from that community. So to me, long story short, yes, there's a huge need for transparency, and that's a given. And what that also tells us, though, as jewelry designers and entrepreneurs, is we can start in a place where we can control that. So you can do things like make sure your posts on your blog and your social feed, like I said before, aren't just a product photo posting factory. Instead, I see some pictures behind the scenes or some information about the people behind the brand. If you are hesitant to share the founder's story, some people might just not be in that space for multiple reasons. Maybe there's not a specific founder. I just wanted to point out to them that there are some brands doing really well in retail that are able to do that without sharing their founder's story, but they still create a really powerful community around their brand. One brand I discovered through their marketing gal at a Christmas party is the brand Eloquii. I think I'm saying that right. Eloquii. Fast Company just did a write-up on them. And they are a plus-size gals fashion brand. You don't know the founder, but you feel like you are a part of their community. So for people not sure if they want to tell their own founder story yet, that'd be a brand to look at for inspiration. But another big way that you as a business owner can really share your brand story is to do something I like to call 360-degree PR. And that's sort of like if you imagine your public relations as a wheel. And it's always turning, and there's all these different spokes on the wheel, and they each represent different kinds of stories. So as a business, whether it's your blog or your social media or your PR, you want to be sort of moving that wheel. So of course, sharing your accessories and your products, but also sharing your aha moment, sharing your business story, sharing anecdotes and tips from your own entrepreneurial journey, giving us a peek at yourself and what you love and who you are as a person. So again, that's like an ever-moving wheel. And it not only ensures people don't get bored with what you're talking about, but also that they really engage with you as a business owner. And from a press perspective, that's going to give you more stories in the press in different places. So again, it's not just your accessory. Maybe you're in Style magazine section in another area talking about accessories tips. And that's just cementing your name and your brand in people's heads in a different way.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, it's all about getting people to remember, the brand and the community. And I love the way that you describe it, because I think it's really helpful, for those who have a challenge, sort of communicating either their founder story or creating that sort of energy or sense of community around their brands. Super important.
I was going to add to that, if they are stuck, sometimes it's hard to make that first step. It's usually the first step that's the hardest. You're like, I don't want to share myself. What are people going to think about me?
So vulnerable.
Yeah, it is. And then I always remind myself, look at all those gram people, the Instagrammers I am stalking, because it's not just because of the products I love, because I stalk a lot of, in a healthy way, girl bosses and entrepreneurs who inspire me. It's because I like seeing what they do. Like, I want to see what they're up to, or I love those personal photos because I want to connect with them. And when I see someone sharing who they are beyond their product, I feel like they're a person just like me, and we can relate to each other. And that's the kind of brand I follow long term.
That's a great point. I think that people don't some of the designers like may not be thinking in that terms, but like people really want to get to know the person behind the brand. I think it's so important.
I mean, look at Oprah. Everyone's obsessed with Oprah because we've been there. She lost 50 pounds. What happened to Stedman? Like everything in Oprah has always been an open book. And we like, look at what happened. America is on board with that open book. So people want that. Look to people you follow and get inspired by them. And then, baby steps to sharing. You don't have to like give them all your intel, but just baby steps.
Yeah. Little steps, one at a time. So you kind of touched on this point or topic of vulnerability. And I know from my own personal experience, especially when I was starting out, I have, I'm not as reserved maybe as I was when I first started selling my own work. But like, it's jewelry's so personal, right? Like we've designed these collections. We're, we might not be at a point in our business when we're starting out or even a few years in, or maybe we've made the choice to do our sales in-house. We're putting ourselves out there, might feel really vulnerable, because it is so personal to us, and we want to, we want people to like us, and we want people to like our brand. So that fear of rejection or the fear of the no kind of starts to take over, and people start, I know from personal experience when I was first starting out that, it took me about 6 months to start asking for orders from stores, because that's the way we sold back then. It was only wholesale. And every day I would come home, my husband at the time would be like, how are the sales going? I'd be like, oh, I'm still finishing my collection. I always had an excuse about like what was going on. So, I get it. Like that lack of confidence, definitely like overcame me for a while. And, having confidence and like, being okay with that like rejection piece is a huge part of, building a PR strategy and a PR presence, and also building sales in your business. Can you talk a little bit more about how designers can, develop more confidence for themselves to put themselves out there without like, maybe it's baby steps. I don't know. I'm sure you have some like really good tips.
100%. I love talk about courage and confidence and discomfort zones. I could do it all day long because, first of all, like you, I'm a person who had to, especially in the beginning, fight fear regularly until the overcoming of it sort of became a healthy obsession, like educating myself, because I knew that without being able to act, I wouldn't be able to do what I want to do with my life. And I want to remind everybody that there's nothing unique to being afraid, and not to put you down, but just to say, don't worry, we all get it, because we're all there. And most success stories, no one's gonna be like, oh, that was so easy. And I feel like once you tune yourself into it, you start hearing it. Like my guilty pleasure is Dancing with the Stars. I love watching people compete, and I love competition and dancing. It's all in one space. But what I also love is how everyone admits to being really scared before they go out there. So it's just a nice, healthy reminder that we're all afraid to do things that are new and different. So that sort of led me, when I was training myself to act despite a fear, is to keep reminding myself that you don't have to be fearless for this to happen. I think we need to accept that holding ourselves to this, like I have to be fearless and much more brave before I do anything, is going to hold you back forever. Because if we're okay with understanding that we're going to be scared at the start, and that's okay, and we can sort of feel that fear and go with it anyways, it's going to give ourselves a little bit more relaxation right away. Because sometimes we're like, oh my gosh, look what I'm feeling like. I guess I'm not ready, or I can't do it now. And then the fear keeps feeding on itself and making it worse and worse. Whereas taking action usually takes the anxiety out of our head. But to do that, I sort of, after I give myself permission to be cool with being afraid, and reminding myself that a lot of successful people are the first time they do something, I also remind myself of things like, scientifically, fear is going to only last a few seconds, and that I'm going to be rocking it out and doing my thing. I like to remind myself that my fear is sometimes also excitement. It's just excitement that's being contained inside of me. And I'm like, let it get out. Because once I start acting and doing something, I'm like, okay, I feel so much better. And another big thing I do, and this is actually the first time I've talked about this ever, but I have a journal on my computer that I call my discomfort zone journal. And I've been using it for years. And I write down moments when I'm really afraid to do something or super anxious about it, and I'm just like avoiding it. So I know I can't avoid it any longer. So I write down exactly what I need to do and how I'm feeling. And then I do it. Then I take the action that I'm afraid of doing, and I experience it. And it's always much better than I actually thought it was. And the high of accomplishing something you're afraid of is so powerful. Like the empowerment you feel is pulsing through you. And then I write about it in that same journal afterwards, because if you start doing that, you can go back to that journal and be like, okay, I was totally afraid to call that buyer and look what happened. I got a great deal. Or I was so afraid to email that blogger. And even though they weren't ready for me right now, they wrote back and they were really nice. And that was such a cool experience. So that's a big thing I do to keep myself moving forward, remind myself that I can do things. And a couple of other pieces of advice I wanted to give your listeners, because I'm a big, have to get myself psyched up to do things sometimes. I have a cheerleading squad, as I call them, that I always go to: my sister, my mom, my best friend, and my husband. Only one of them is an entrepreneur, but that's okay, because they're the people who remind me of the stuff that matters. Like, you're awesome. You can do this. So if I have to do something super daunting, whether it's, do a TV segment or do a big speech, I will text them or call them right before, and they pump me up and fill me with so much great energy. And so whoever your cheerleading squad is, whatever you have to do to get pumped up, I urge people to invite those activities into every part of their day, because we think we have no time. But if you don't get the inner work working, flex your discomfort zone muscles, remind yourself about how important it is to share your business with the world. If you can't feel powerful on the inside, the outer work, which is your sales or your PR or your marketing, is going to stumble. And it's not going to be focused, and your intention won't be clear. So I'm a big believer of working on things that help my insides feel good before I take action.
I love that. I'm going to get a cheerleading squad.
It's so great. And they know, trust Tracy, they know now. I'm like, okay, guys, I need it. And they lay it with emojis, and every person has their own style, and I know who I need to go to. Mom's the great tough love. One of my girlfriends is hilarious, and I turn to them to pump up. And one more thing you should do if you're ever going into a moment when you're like, oh my gosh, can I do this? Analysis paralysis. I think of two of my favorite singers, which are Barbra Streisand and Beyonce, my two Bs. And they are hugely amazing performers and singers, but what not everyone realizes is they're both hugely afraid and intimidated by performing. And so, Barbara barely ever performs because she's got terrible stage fright. And Beyonce takes on her persona, which is Sasha Fierce, when she gets on stage, because they have to sort of step into this thing that isn't themselves. So for years, I've called this version of myself my power self. And when I am feeling sort of weaker than usual or nervous, and I know I need to bring it, I sort of shut my eyes and I say, it's time to be power Sabina. And I sort of transform into a gal who is owning it, which in truth we all know is a person who's already inside us, who we're meant to be. But I go, if you sort of trick yourself into being like, okay, girls, it's time to be power Tracy or power Amy, it can really change how you deliver.
So awesome. I love that. I'm totally going to have my own. I mean, I actually did this practice before with one of my friends, Erica Learmark. I know
Erica.
Erica's awesome. Yeah. She's amazing. But one of her strategies in her former Daily Whip program, she now has a program called Mark Mastery, which she uses some of these tools, is what is it that you need today? And so for a very long time, I was needing to attract the right customers. So I came up with an avatar. My avatar was attractive amethyst because I wanted it to relate to jewelry. And, every day I needed to attract more of the right kind of clients for, these custom jewelry projects that I was doing. I would step into that role of attractive amethyst, and it totally works. And for some reason, it's just you kind of come out of yourself, and you're not afraid anymore. And I also want to touch on one thing that you said, because you said something about excitement is sort of fear is sort of like excitement, but it's just you said something about that. But one of my favorite quotes that I used to say at least 4 times or 5 times a year in my yoga classes when I was teaching on a regular basis was this quote by this guy, Fritz Perls. And it says, fear is just excitement without the breath, because you're not breathing through it. So, fear is just energy, right? And excitement is energy, and they're actually the same energy. But if you notice that you're feeling afraid, it's usually because you're not breathing.
It really is. And it's funny. I am you can probably tell, I'm a hugely excitable, energetic person, which is my powers can be used for good or evil. So that excitement can be channeled into creation and serving the world as I'm meant to serve, which is teaching PR, or it could be used for letting anxiety pitch a tent in my head and go crazy. So I need to release, and I it's a hard lesson to teach yourself. It is a true practice to act instead of freezing, because the act alone, taking action, lets that excitement just release, but staying frozen lets it build up and you're like completely frozen.
Yes, totally. Love that. So you mentioned this daily practice, which is really cool. You have your, what did you call it? You called it your journal. What was your journal called?
Oh, I have my discomfort
zone journal. Oh my God, I'm totally going to do one of those too. Do you have any other daily practices that you would recommend for people who are like trying to build more confidence on a regular basis that they should be doing, or anything else that you'd like to add?
Now that we've talked about sort of inner work things like our journal, I'm a huge meditator, but again, each his or her own. Not everyone gets as woo-woo as I do. But a big thing I believe is one way to allay fear and to become more confident is to be as prepared and educated as possible. Because once you know what you're doing, you might not be the best. Like, I was training for a 5K. Once I finished the training, I'm not going to win that race, but at least I know I can finish it and I can do it. And then it takes away that fear. So for people listening who want to, let's say, get themselves out there as a designer, I like to remind them that they just need to sort of practice what it takes to do that. So 2 things I would say, start doing this now and you're going to feel a lot less afraid, would be number 1, because all success in sales or publicity and business is really born from relationships. Mm-hmm. So one thing I would say is I would love you to start connecting with your media or sales targets genuinely, authentically, strategically on social media. So that means replying to them or retweeting or taking part in a conversation. This doesn't mean spamming them with your pitches and your ideas every 5 seconds, but when you start interacting with the people who you are currently sort of afraid or intimidated by, then it starts to squelch that fear, because all of a sudden they recognize your name. You probably recognize them. You might see their kids' photos. It sort of becomes this like the press. They're just like us from a celebrity mag, or like the salespeople. They're just like us. So a big way that I squelch the fear I have on taking publicity action or sales action is getting out there, connecting with them. And then the extra bonus is, and they're going to start seeing who you are, and that's going to be how you build a relationship in possible publicity or sales. And another thing I would suggest to designers who want to get through fear and grow their business is, I talked about relationships being huge. So you dive into social media to do that and really practice that, grow those relationships in a safe zone, because social media feels really safe. Mm-hmm. The second thing you want to start practicing is learning how to communicate about your brand and your message and your value, and do that without fear. Because if we don't sound confident in our brand story, then how can someone else be confident in it? But that's hard to do in the beginning. You sort of feel like imposter syndrome, or like, what do I know? Like, you get those things. So what I taught myself to do, and I teach my students and my clients, is, start practicing sharing that story in places you can control. So on social media, on your blog, and practice that. And when you do that, you'll also be able to see what people engage in and what people really get into. And that's going to boost your confidence to do more of that. So those are 2 sort of safe zones where you can practice these strategies. You have total control over them. And it's going to make you more and more confident as a person who's playing like the PR sales game with people.
Awesome. I love all of those things. I think that like practicing and like just stepping into the role, like sort of acting as if, I used to say this to I keep bringing this back to yoga. I don't know why. I tell the jewelry designers this too. When I would be teaching like an advanced arm balance or something, people would be like, I remember being a young student like 20 years ago too, thinking like, there's no way in hell I'm ever going to be able to stand on my hands and do a handstand or do, crow pose or to do like a side crow or some of these like more advanced like, things where you're just like literally balancing on your hands. And, step by step, little by little, so you keep practicing and you get stronger and better. And then all of a sudden it happens and you do it. And I used to say to my students, when they would be like rolling their eyes at me, like there's no way in hell I'm ever going to be able to do that. I would be like, fake it till you make it, because like that's really the key to success. But like putting yourself out there like you've already achieved whatever it is that you want to achieve, like
you
whatever
have to,
it is.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that, I love how you said that about I don't even know what a crow's pose is, but it sounds very hard. Like yoga terrifies me, but I'll tell you, when I had to train for this 5K, I couldn't run around the block really. Like I love doing other things, Pilates, a stair climber, but running was not my thing. And the beauty of it was I did this app called Couch to 5K. So like every day they added on. So I went from being a gal who was like, I'm not running around the block to being able to run a 5K straight. And so just like you, like it just takes practice. But if you start now, in 3 months or 6 months from now, it's going to be amazing.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, this was awesome, Sabina. I can't wait for our next podcast, which we'll have to schedule soon.
I'd love to. I would love to.
Well, thanks for being here today. So we mentioned it a little bit at the beginning of the show, but tell everyone where they can find you.
Okay. And first, I just wanted to tell them, just all of you listening, because I know you're hearing Tracy and I talk and you're thinking, can I do it? I want them to know that no matter where they are located and how much experience they have, they can do it if they practice and they put themselves out there. And I was also thinking of all your jewelry designer guys and gals today, because there I was getting ready today, putting my favorite pair of earrings of the week in. And I thought, thank goodness this woman created this product and put it out there so that I could find it, because I love these earrings. They have my dog's face on them, by the way. Cute. And she made them custom, but I thought it's so important for them to put themselves out there. So I wanted to sort of throw that out to them, but also where they can find me, the best places are via sabinaknows.com and at Sabina Knows everywhere on social media. And I also would encourage them to sign up for my newsletter, which you can do on my website, because it will alert you to when I'm laying down some free PR and motivational goodness. I do 2 classes a month with free PR classes, so they can hang out with me and learn and get empowered, and I'll see them online.
I can't wait to have you teaching more PR to our people too. Awesome.
I'd love to.
Thank you. Thanks, honey.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here today.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening today. Wasn't that a great interview with Sabina? I love that girl, and I'm very excited to be doing many more podcasts with her, hopefully down the road, which is super exciting. Anyway, Robin and I are always trying to bring you the best content, interview some of the best experts. So, this is really a passion project for us. I love this podcast, and I hope you do too. So if you're enjoying what you're hearing on the podcast, we would love for you to share it with your friends. So if you have other friends that are jewelry designers or makers, or even other creatives and makers who are maybe out of the jewelry space, because I feel like a lot of the topics that we talk about can be really useful for them as well. So if you're inspired, we would love for you to share this with your friends, share it on social media, share it in any of the Facebook groups that you're a part of that you think people would, really enjoy this content. And we'd also love to hear from you in iTunes. So if you're over on iTunes right now, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. You can go check it out over at flourishthriveacademy.com/iTunes. You can subscribe to the podcast, make sure that you give us a rating and review it so that we know how we're doing. And we're super excited to keep bringing you great content every week. Make sure that you check out our sponsor. We have links on the show notes on the podcast post. You can go over to flourishthriveacademy.com/episode 52, and you can go grab all the links for the show notes. We have links for Sabina's content and some great recap of this episode today. So super excited. Go over there and check it out. All right. Thanks for listening today. Take care until next time.